Good evening. Welcome to the January 18th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. I will now call the meeting to order. Please note that this meeting is being attended by the Planning Commission staff and the applicants via teleconference. Thank you for your patience as we continue to navigate city business through this meeting process. For the benefit of the public and as required by the Brown Act, the vote will be by roll call. City Clerk Harper?
Yes, Chair Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Klinger,
Here.
Commissioner Thomas,
Here.
Commissioner Massetti,
I'm here.
Commissioner Campbell,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda by motion of the Planning Commission. This is the time to notify the public of any changes to the agenda, rearrange the order of the agenda, or provide an opportunity for any member of the Planning Commission or staff to request an item to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Assuming we don't have any of that, do we have a motion and a second?
I move we approve.
Commissioner Klinger moving.
Yes.
And
I'll
who is
second. I'll second. Commissioner Thomas.
Thomas? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take a roll call vote now. Chair Miller, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Klinger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Massetti, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries, 5 votes yes.
Thank you. At this time, members of the public may address the commission regarding the items on the Planning Commission agenda pursuant to the Brown Act. The commission cannot discuss or take action on any items not on the agenda unless authorized by law. Those members of the public wishing to provide comments were asked to send comments via email to the city clerk or via the comment icon on the city website before 6 p.m. today. Comments provided via email by 6 p.m. will be distributed to the Planning Commission and posted on the city website for review by the public. Emailed comments received after that time will be posted on the city's website and forwarded to the Planning Commission after the meeting. Any documents for review should be sent to the city clerk prior to the meeting for distribution. Those members of the public wishing to call in can join the Zoom meeting from any electronic device by providing the following link or by dialing the phone number. These members requesting to speak by phone or on Zoom can unmute by entering *6 when called upon to speak. Once in the meeting, you will be added to the waiting room until the public comment period begins. At that time, you will be allowed to join the meeting to offer your comments. Commenters who are not applicants will be allotted 5 minutes to address the commission. The ability to comment will be disabled when your allotted time has expired. City Clerk Harper, do we have any emailed comments?
Yes, one email comment was received. It's been distributed to the commissioners and made available on the city's website.
Thank you. And there's nobody on the line?
That's correct. No one is on the line.
And onto the consent calendar, approval of the November 1st, 2021 Planning Commission minutes. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved. I second. Mary Ann.
Thank you.
City Clerk Harper?
I'm sorry. Chair Miller, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Klinger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Massetti, how do you vote?
I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Absolutely. 4 votes yes. Motion carries.
Thank you. Reorganization of the Planning Commission. City Clerk Harper?
Okay, this is the time that we will open the floor for nominations for chairperson for the Planning Commission.
I'd like to nominate Michael Thomas.
Okay, Thomas. Are there any other nominations for chair?
This is Commissioner Thomas. I'm gonna thank you, Patty. I very much appreciate that. I'm going to offer as a counter to me, Commissioner Miller, who I think has done a great job the past year. I would like to nominate him to continue as chair through these times. And so that would be, I think, am I allowed to counter offer like that?
Counter offer.
I think so, Amy.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. Amazing, a lawyer who can't talk. Yes, you may.
Okay, are there any other nominations?
Well, we end up needing a vice chairperson. So, if
Yes,
we
we'll-
keep Commissioner Miller, then Commissioner Thomas can be the vice chairperson.
Yeah, we'll get to
You
vice.
can't get out that easy.
Thanks, Mary Ann.
Okay, let's just get us a chairperson first, and then we'll go to vice chairperson. So are there any other nominations? So seeing that there are none, we have Chair Miller has been nominated to be the chair for 2022. And I'm gonna ask for a roll call vote. All in favor, just state your name for me one at a time, please. How about Commissioner Miller? I guess you are for
Shoot,
yourself.
I like doing it, so
Okay, Commissioner Klinger, how do you vote?
I vote for Commissioner Miller.
Okay, Commissioner Massetti, how do you vote?
I'll vote for Commissioner Miller.
Commissioner Thomas, how do you vote?
I vote for Commissioner Miller.
Campbell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, that's 5 votes yes. Everyone voted yes for Commissioner Miller to remain the chairperson of the Planning Commission.
In all seriousness, I would like to just say that I think Steve has done a fantastic job this past year. And I'm very happy that he's been reelected for a second term. Thank you, Steve.
thank you, Commissioner Thomas.
Would anyone else like to provide comments at this time regarding the chairperson? Okay, well, moving on. Congratulations, Chair Miller. So you will continue on for 2022. Now I will open up the nominations for vice chairperson, I'm sorry.
I nominate Commissioner Thomas for vice chair.
I second.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Okay, we have Commissioner Thomas for vice chair, and he is voting for himself. Commissioner Klinger, are you voting for Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Massetti,
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yes.
Okay, that was 5 votes yes for Commissioner Thomas to be the vice chairperson of the Planning Commission for 2022. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it very much.
No new business. On to the public hearing. Item C, the 2021 through 2029 housing element. I guess we're going to plan a public hearing and adopt the resolution. Is there a report?
Yes, Chair, there is. And I will be sharing my screen.
Hmm.
Can everyone see my screen with the presentation?
Yes.
Will confirm. Thank you. All right. Good evening, Chair and goodness gracious. All right. I'm not going to be nervous. Thank you for my first meeting here. Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners. Tonight we are here to discuss actually a pretty weighty topic, which is the housing element update to the city's general plan. Tonight's been a long time coming. The housing element is one of 8 different existing elements within the Seal Beach general plan. The general plan is a driving force document that's adopted by a jurisdiction to govern land use decisions, but it may also influence all kinds of other city policies. And as you can see there, there's a little spoiler alert of things coming your way with updates to the safety element, as well as creation of an environmental justice element later on this year. And these actions are triggered by adoption of a new housing element. We're here to talk about housing. So under state law, jurisdictions must go through the housing element process every 8 years, and they call these cycles, and this is the 6th one. The process itself is a couple years long from the start of the state's process all the way to adoption at the local level. My next couple points here you've heard before from my predecessors, but I think it's important to reiterate them for some context because the decisions in front of you on this element are really challenging ones. There's some big changes that people will have a range of opinions on throughout the community. This cycle is absolutely unlike any of its predecessors. The state has spent the last 5 years telegraphing this with housing bill after housing bill, and most bills are aimed at increasing the volume of housing under that most basic of economic principles, which is supply and demand. So if supply goes up, theoretically costs should come down. Now, in urbanized coastal areas like where we are, that doesn't seem to be the way things are going. Housing prices continue to rise. But nevertheless, the state's plan is really to just keep hammering away at that idea. And the housing element process really proves that point. The State Department of Housing Community Development, which is HCD, and I'll refer to them as HCD for the rest of this presentation, they have been funded to hire a small army of analysts to enforce their interpretation of housing element law. And it has been very challenging for all jurisdictions to take in all the new legislation. A lot of it lacks clarity. Work with HCD and then try to get to an outcome that's ideally acceptable to the community as well as HCD, because it's not enough for a city to adopt the housing element. HCD must deem every single one to have met their standard of the law, and this process is called certification. So what happens if we don't have certified housing element? Well, we have higher risk of litigation. HCD themselves will refer us to the Attorney General. We can lose certain rights on our land use decisions, and we can lose access to grant funding. And just a quick back of the envelope here in Seal Beach, we're talking about up to $2 million in annual grant funds that would be at risk. And a lot of those go to support public works projects, roads, infrastructure, things that are important. So this is a big deal. Okay, so that's it for the doom and gloom right now. We're going to dig into what we're here to talk about. The housing element is about creating opportunities for housing. So as you all know, the city is not a developer. We don't have to build housing ourselves. Our role under state law is to find places for it to go and make it easy for developers to get approvals to build and do things in such a way that housing affordable to lower incomes is built, housing for different subsets of the population, such as special needs, is built, and that housing is available without discrimination and without being built in ways that promote segregation or exacerbate socioeconomic challenges. So there are 1, the sites, and 2, the policies that facilitate development for a range of housing. This is the structure of the housing element that's before you, and we'll touch on each of these, some more briefly than others. There's a lot of data and discussions in the conditions, and those things ultimately lead to that action plan at the end. And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. It's how we facilitate housing development. That's how we get to those objectives of state law and HCD. So as you saw, the housing needs assessment section, kind of that first section after the introduction of the element, goes into a lot of data on our population, how it's housed, and I'm not going to dig into that here in this presentation, but it ends with the RHNA. So the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or the RHNA, is a process that's performed each cycle. HCD gives a total housing unit number to SCAG, who's our regional planning organization. And then SCAG develops the methodology that allocates those units among the different jurisdictions within it. This cycle was, surprise, pretty contentious. Some of you may have followed that process in 2020, and one of the big changes that occurred at the state level, where they determined in this cycle the total number of units was not just going to be about projected forecasted growth, projected need, but it would also be to accommodate existing demand, which is one of the major factors in why this year is so different. The numbers are so much higher. So when SCAG ultimately assigns a unit count to a jurisdiction using the adopted methodology, it will provide not only the total number of units, but it will allocate those units into different income categories. So here are the totals. As I mentioned, this year is obviously just much different than the prior years on all fronts. Our percentage of the units, the total number of units is wildly different. And then we got a much bigger share than we're used to. This is our breakdown by income category. So what does this mean? The law defines income categories based on area median income. That's published by the state every year. The current median income for Orange County with family 4 is about $107,000, and everything in this table is based off of that standard. So keep in mind, those numbers are for a family of 4. They do adjust depending on the size of the household, but we're going to stick with family of 4 for these purposes. So you want to picture needing at least to find a unit that has 2 bedrooms because you've got 4 people for these amounts of money. So if you're at moderate income, you're probably going to be able to find housing that's affordable to you. And that is to find a 2-bedroom unit for about $3,200 a month, or maybe a little less. That's probably realistic. You could probably find that. But if you are low income or below low income, you are going to have a very tough time in Seal Beach and any other coastal urbanized area. And I remember looking for an apartment when I moved here 20 something years ago, and you certainly weren't paying $800 a month for it then. So you are not paying $800 a month for an apartment now, certainly not 2 bedrooms. So how does this work? What is the city supposed to do to get 459 units built that charge below market rates? And the answer, which we've discussed already, is number 1, sites, and number 2, policies. So what the law says is that we have to offer pathways to making this work. Again, we aren't the developer. We need to look at impediments to development and take action to reduce or eliminate those. And as you saw in the packet, we received comments from HCD on the draft. We received those comments on November 19th. And we have had to update this document to be ready for public draft review on January 6th. So it was a really short turnaround time. And as we were preparing to move forward with your recommendation to the City Council, we're also being mindful of how the council will need to make its findings to be consistent with state law and HCD's interpretation of the law. So one of the important findings that they'll need to make at adoption is that housing development can occur, including on sites where there is existing development, because the sites and the policies together combined in the housing element create that pathway. We're able to kind of take a look at the various assets that sites have, such as existing access to utilities, to transportation and transit, to amenities that people want to live near, like schools, and approving policies that remove barriers such as zoning, so where it does not allow for housing, and finding therefore that by taking these actions, housing can be built, because again, the sites and the policies and market forces here will all come together to try to achieve the goals. And if we don't create an element that meets HCD standards, the recent housing bills have repercussions, such as limiting the types of projects we can reject, most notably projects that contain affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing in this context, I want to point out that I generally mean for housing to meet the income levels, those lower income levels you saw on the previous slide, it typically means the units have covenants on them that are recorded on the units so that they adhere to those income levels. And when you're in that type of situation, usually that housing is subsidized. So sometimes it's a local government that does it. There may be a trust that does it. There's programs through the state, but there is subsidy being provided in order to bring those rent levels down. The state has given us some guidance on how to demonstrate that our sites will foster the development of affordable units, and that answer is density. So theoretically, the higher the density, the greater the economy of scale, and therefore development is more likely to be able to accommodate units for lower income residents or below market rate in its financial model. So commonly you might see that a portion of the units will be at market rate, but there's enough of them, you can put enough units on one site that it creates the ability to offer some lower income units within that same development, and then the financial pro forma still pencils. So as a city with less than 25,000 residents, the standard for us that's provided under state law is that we are supposed to provide a minimum of 20 units per acre. 30 is of course preferred. There is also a formula for how we can count ADUs as affordable. That's there was a process on a region-wide basis to determine how many ADUs that are already existing in the region are considered affordable. So we're allowed to use that calculation essentially. And those don't necessarily have to have covenants on it. The state is just allowing us to say by default that a certain percentage of accessory dwelling units will be at affordable levels. So the resources and opportunities that we can provide is, of course, to identify the sites and rezone those that are not already zoned for residential development to accommodate or allow for residential development. And that's the primary thing that the city has to offer. As I mentioned, there are other things out there through state funding programs, CDBG, community development block grants is something that the city is able to take some advantage of. Things like that come up to help fund affordable housing or projects of that sort. And sometimes there are other ways to bring cost of development down that are demonstrated there. And again, this just theoretically makes the inclusion of affordable units more palatable to a developer. These are some of the primary constraints that are outlined in the housing element. And yes, the state, again, essentially says that zoning is a constraint. If we're not allowing for housing, that's a constraint. Realistically, the biggest issues in Seal Beach are the Coastal Commission. Everyone on this Zoom understands that adds a whole different layer of approvals at this point. They have a very different outlook on housing than HCD, even though they're both state agencies. And then, of course, there's the cost of land and development, which the city has no control over whatsoever. Fair housing is included in the constraints section of the element. And as you can see, quite a bit of information has been added since the last draft that you saw based on HCD's comment letter and what other communities are doing. So at the end of the day, the point is to make sure that the sites and policies implemented in the housing element are not doing anything to exacerbate discrimination or segregation. An obvious example would be to look at a city like Long Beach, where you can identify census tracts that are primarily people of color or having high poverty rates. HCD does not want to see cities placing all of their affordable housing sites in areas that are already low resource. And Seal Beach is obviously a very different community than Long Beach, and we don't see those same types of clusters. That's what the assessment in the draft there shows. But nevertheless, it's still important to make sure that ultimately our site, especially those that are intended to accommodate lower income units, are not intentionally kept away from high resource areas. This is a summary of the policy kind of groupings, I guess, if you will, that are included in the action plan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these as the Planning Commission focuses really on land use and not necessarily some of these other policies, but I did want to make sure we're not ignoring the points that HCD brought up in their letter. So these are the major tasks that I've grouped together, if you will. So as discussed, we will need to rezone for the RENA to include sites and standards. This is a huge component of the element. We don't currently have a mixed use zone that's adequate to meet the 20 or more units per acre standard that they are requiring. Several programs in the element also discuss improved coordination with regional entities for kind of sharing of resources, as well as providing more information to developers and better evaluation of programs as we go on. And all of this is again about making things easy and simple for developers, property owners to place housing on their land. So as you know, the city is also drafting the local coastal program. And the rules of the Coastal Commission are still essentially rules, but the idea is that the process will be faster and a little easier, hopefully for applicants, again, reducing that time and incentivizing developers by the money that they save with the reduction in processing times. Just a few more notes here. We revised the section on prior programs. In accordance with HCD's comment letter, we increased the fair housing analysis and we did our best to augment the text in other places where we could to address their comments. So finally, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the sites. Seal Beach has insufficient existing residentially zoned sites to accommodate the RENA. So that means we don't have enough places currently zoned for residential in order to accommodate. And so we need to make changes. And you all will remember from previous presentations that there was a committee that convened in the spring of 2021 to provide recommendations and work through the process with staff on where these sites should be. And staff additionally did outreach with property owners to discuss the housing element process and what the city needs, where we need to go in order to have a certified housing element. Just some reminders, because a site is on the list does not mean a project is approved. We have quite a ways to go, actually, beginning with the rezoning, which is a very public and somewhat lengthy process. In previous cycles, jurisdictions had 3 years to rezone. That's only the case if you have a certified housing element. If you do not, under current law, the rezoning must be completed by October of this year. Based on what we're seeing from HCD, we really don't know if we'll have a certified housing element. Only one jurisdiction in the SCAG region currently has one. From what I've found and from what I hear, that means that everyone else that has adopted and reviewed it and submitted to HCD, because some of the SCAG jurisdictions are kind of ahead of us in time, they've been denied. So we will need to proceed as if we don't have a certified housing element, and we will need to initiate these rezoning efforts as quickly as possible so that that process is coming along. And I will tell you honestly that it's unlikely we can make an October 2022 deadline because of the environmental analysis that will need to be done to get through the rezoning and the CEQA. By October, we're still going to be, in a position where we're trying to make our best faith effort to be moving this forward, but that's a pretty challenging deadline to make. This table summarizes the sites and the estimated developable acreage within the sites, the potential density, and then the potential units. So resulting in a higher number than our RENA allocation, and that's what HCD wants to see. They want to see some of that buffer where we're not cutting everything so short that absolutely every site needs to be developed with the exact number of units proposed to hit our 1245 number. So we've brought it up to 1543. Now, all of these you have seen before. We have the shops at Rossmore, where the assumption is that there is enough parking to accommodate additional development at the site to create a mixed use environment. The same is true of Old Ranch Town Center, where you have some reconfiguration or some reconsideration for housing development. This is the Country Club site, where there may be opportunity to utilize parts of the existing development differently and incorporate some housing. I do want to talk about this site just a bit. This graphic is a little bit different than the one that's in the housing element. The one in the housing element calls out specific areas of Leisure World. And after continuing to look at this past that January 6th date where we needed to make the draft available for public review, I would like the Planning Commission to consider a change to what's currently in the draft housing element. The existing draft discusses redevelopment of areas that are currently carports. And these were selected as they can be removed without taking out units. However, staff's recommendation at this point is to revise that language related to Leisure World before sending it over to the City Council. So currently on page B6, which is at the end of the document where if there's a site description, there is language that reads Leisure World. The Leisure World is an active senior community located on a 533-acre site and developed with 6,608 residential units. Each building contains about 10 to 12 units. Parking is scattered throughout the site and contained within carport structures. Parking is also provided on the street. The 150 units can be accommodated on approximately 5 acres at a density of 30 units to the acre within areas that are currently developed with simple carports. New 2-story buildings can accommodate parking on the ground level with units above. Since only 1% of the site is anticipated to be redeveloped with removal of some carports and the incorporation of the replacement parking within new development, the existing uses will not impede the anticipated amount of residential development. What staff is proposing is replacing the text instead with Leisure World. Leisure World is an active senior community located at the 533-acre site and developed with 6,608 residential units. An additional 150 units can be accommodated on approximately 5 acres at a density of 30 units to the acre within areas that are currently utilized for community shared amenities. New 3-story buildings can accommodate parking on the ground level with units above. As only 1% of the site is proposed for redevelopment and adequately sized common areas are present, the existing uses will not impede the anticipated amount of residential development. And the purpose of this text change is, and suggested text change, is to better meet HCD's requirements that existing development not impede future development. So while certainly carports could be removed, removing hundreds of carports each for their own owner will definitely present a greater challenge than redeveloping common areas. I have another commercial site here at Seal Beach Plaza. The accurate storage site. Sunset Aquatic Marina. This is the Navy site along PCH. The Seal Beach Center. Main Street specific plan area. And I think this is our last one here, 99 Marina Drive. Okay, so what happens next? This process here has been about a year long. We are headed towards the finish line. So tonight's Planning Commission public hearing is an important step that leads to your recommendation to the City Council. The City Council will conduct a public hearing at a special meeting on February 7th. And then this housing element must be submitted to HCD by February 12th, which is the statutory deadline for submittal. As I mentioned earlier, other communities are ahead of us in time and have submitted their adopted housing elements and had them rejected by HCD. That may very much happen to us, which is why we will also be moving forward with the zoning amendment as quickly as possible. Once we submit prior to February 12th, HCD has 90 days to review and comment on the element. And as I mentioned, we'll be simultaneously kicking off these other things, the zoning code update, the safety element update, and then creation of environmental justice. So all things triggered by the housing element update. And that concludes my presentation. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Are there any commissioner comments?
Yes, I have comments.
Go ahead.
So is it fair to say that in the packet, there's a marked up copy and a clean copy, and everything in red is basically new to this commission, right? It wasn't there in the September review.
That's correct.
Okay, so I have 3 things. One of them was the change in language about Leisure World. I completely support that and had a discussion with Alexa on that. So I would hope that would get supported to make that change. But secondly, can you go to the table IV or Roman numeral 4-16? It's on page IV 77 or 78. And if you look at the last 2 rows, I believe they're a duplicate of each other. And
I see.
the lower one needs to be removed.
Yes.
So you're okay with that?
Yeah, I agree. That's a duplicate, but I'm not sure what's happening there. Yes.
And the other one has to do with, I think, language that was originally in the reviewed copy earlier in September. And it's just kind of a sticking point. It's on page 269. It's Roman numeral 221. And it says recent census data estimated that the commonly occurring household size in Seal Beach is one person, 45.1%. Well, 45.1% of 12,500 households is 5,637 households. I don't think anybody will argue that there's at least 50% women in those households. In Leisure World, I know we have more than 50%, and we make up half of the city. So if half of those 45% of households are women, that's 22% of the households in the city are single women. Well, they may be are women, single person women. Excuse me. So what bothered me was the next page. It says recent Census Bureau estimates report that about 6% of Seal Beach households are female headed. So unless between the 6% and 22%, all those women that are in their homes alone are not the head of their households, I don't know how these two can be consistent. I just think that we're approving this whole report, not just the sites. So it might be important to try to reconcile those. Unless my calculations are wrong, of course.
I'd be happy to take a look at those. We want to be as accurate as we can.
Is the definition of a head of household, is that a tax filing status? I mean, can one person be a head of household? I mean, you can't on taxes. Is that where that comes in?
I think that may be the case.
But that's not the intent of the housing unit. The housing element is supposed to find out how many homes are single person, and then, you know, you're trying to find out how many people you have to house in what categories. And this is a category of housing.
Oh, I understand what you're saying, but I still think head of household just defines as a tax filing status. Otherwise, the government wouldn't have a way to figure that out.
Yeah, that's true. That doesn't mean it is relevant to this, though, because this has to do with, you know, at least in Leisure World, there's more than 50% of the households are single, and there's women in them.
Perhaps as part of Alexa checking, we might be able to add a clarifying footnote to define the terms so that if that, I'll call it a discrepancy for want of a better word, on page 2-21 versus 2-22, so that we can explain it if it still needs to stay that way. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quoting the census in both cases, right? So you go back and say, well, is the census wrong? I don't know. All I know is this is inconsistent in our interpretation of what the census says. Other than those and changing the Leisure World language, I'm completely happy with it.
Are there any other commissioner comments?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Thomas. I have a question for Director Smittle. So you mentioned two things that have to happen in order for us to, in general, that have to happen in order for this update to be to meet the state's requirements. One is that we have to provide the land, right, in order to have affordable housing, which this does actually. And I have a question for Steve on that. But the second question is that you talk about the policies, and frankly, we live in a pretty relatively certainly wealthy area, and you have to have these policies that support affordable housing. And we talk about things like, participating in regional planning efforts and, streamlining the approval process. I didn't hear a whole lot or read a whole lot about, if you want to call it, kind of what you talked about as far as like subsidizing and having kind of restrictions placed on developments like that. I guess my question is there enough in there from the policy side to kind of meet what the state's kind of getting at? And is it possible for us to meet what the state's trying to get at there from a policy standpoint? Because we are built out for the most part, and we are on the coast, and there's not a whole lot we can do, right? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Thomas. And the answer is I don't know. Certainly HCD wants to see, they would love to, see policies that have, very specific things about, providing funding for different resources and that type of thing. I think this will be a process that we go through, and some of those policies in there are designed to bring up these topics over time, to work with the council about, what types of actions make sense for the community. I could definitely see those being the areas that will, really take a lot of time and focus over the course of the year to have those really tough conversations with the council and with the community of, okay, if HCD says no, where do we need to get to? I'm hopeful if they, do not certify this draft of the housing element, that they'll provide us more specific information. In the letter that they had, sometimes they were specific, sometimes it was real, it's general. We're kind of trying to read the tea leaves between their letter and what they're telling other communities. My hope would be that we'd get to something where we at least had a more specific understanding of where they wanted us to get to, and then, be able to have that conversation and, have the council make a determination as to whether or not they were willing to go down that path or not, or, how we could get to an end that works for everyone, at least to some degree. But it's, like I said, it's been an absolutely wild experience, and communities that thought they were doing such a great job are getting letters back that, just basically say, no, this whole thing is terrible. You're not there yet. So yeah, I don't know for sure.
Okay, but it is, I guess you kind of answered my question. It's an honest attempt to try to meet what they're asking for. And I asked that because we're being asked to recommend this plan to council. So yeah, I think you've given me the answer that is we don't know. I totally understand what you're saying. And like you said, I mean, if the state comes back and says, no, you missed on 1, 2, 3, 4, well, then we can go back and revisit that. So we get that opportunity, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, we do. We'll continue through this process, no matter what the outcome of this is. And yes, absolutely. This draft is certainly our best foot forward to address the comments that we received and to, uphold the community's wishes and the input that was received during this process. So that's a good draft.
Yeah, very good. Okay, then I do have, I just want to ask a couple of my fellow commissioners a question. And it's, I know that Patty and Steve both went through kind of the detailed process. They were on the working group or subcommittee or whatever we were calling it, that kind of looked
Can I interrupt, Commissioner Thomas? We still need to open the public hearing. I'm assuming we won't have any comment, but before you get into discussion, can we do that?
Yes. City Attorney Grayson, I appreciate that. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I'll now open the public hearing. City Clerk Harper, do we have any emailed comments?
The one
Can we
email.
make any more comments? Can we make any comments before you open the public hearing?
The one.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I just thought, I mean, it's more, this would be more the time to ask staff questions for clarification. And then once you get into your discussion and deliberation, that would really be the best time for you to be making comments.
To each other.
Yes.
I have some staff issues.
Okay.
And yeah, if you need to have staff clarify, yes, this would be the time.
The floor is
Okay.
yours.
Mike, are you finished?
Yeah, I'm finished. I guess maybe, Steve, we open the hearing, maybe we close it and go to you and then reopen it later. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, can I make my comments?
Please do.
Okay. First one is a historical comment. If you look under the community context, section 2, page 1, it states in 1944, the U.S. Navy acquired half the city to construct the naval weapons station. Actually, in 1941, both the Joint Forces, it was then Los Alamitos Naval Air Station and Seal Beach Naval Weapons Station. The land was condemned by the federal government, fee simple, in 1941, before World War II broke out in December. They anticipated going to war, so they condemned the land in 1944. War broke out they condemned the land in 1941. The war broke out in December of 1941. Both bases were operational by 1944. I know that because I've done extensive research, and I also have copies of the condemnation documents. Now, another point of interest for the people down at Old Town in the Hill, the land for the weapons station was taken from the Irvine Ranch, the James Irvine Company. It was not taken from the Hellman. Hellman was one of the landowners who was wealthy, like Bixby and Irvine, but he didn't have much land down here. And he really concentrated his efforts in San Francisco with Wells Fargo Bank and Levi Strauss. So when you look at the history of Seal Beach, the weapons station was taken from the Irvine. Los Al was taken from Bixby, all in 1941. That's just a historical point there. Secondly, in section 2, page 24, they have the assisted housing at risk of conversion. They state that all financial obligations have been repaid. That needs to be clarified. Actually, a new loan was taken out. They repaid the existing ones by taking out, they refinanced a whole new bond for an additional $1 million. And they repaid the original bonds, and they provided funds for improvements. But the term of this new loan or bridge bond is out another 10 years. So, and they also have a new company managing the park. So they're not all free and clear over at the trailer park. They've still got encumbrances down the road. Okay. And then my third issue is the public notice distribution list. Our housing element was sent to 43 agencies, but not to the Los Alamitos Joint Forces Training Base. Now, that should have been the first agency to be notified because the flight tracks go right over the proposed site on Old Ranch at the corner of Lamson and Seal Beach Boulevard. So my question is, why were they not notified? Why wasn't the Airport Land Use Commission notified as other cities have been? I mean, this is such a glaring omission. Quite frankly, I can't help but think it was deliberate. Now, why? Now, if a project is not approved or turned down by the ALUC, and then the city decides to override it, you got to do it by a supermajority of 4-1, then the city has to accept all liability should there be an air-related incident. This must be taken very seriously. This document must be sent to the Joint Forces Training Base for their review and comment, as all other agencies. So I would like to know why they weren't sent a copy and why the ALUC wasn't sent a copy. Notifying people is not the same thing. We have 43 agencies here that all received a copy. The base should have received a copy, and so should the ALUC. I'd like to know why they weren't. That's the extent of my comments, but I'd like to know from staff, why wasn't the base sent a copy of the housing element, and why wasn't the Airport Land Use Commission sent a copy?
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell. The we are still in process. We will be sending a copy to the Airport Land Use Commission. I apologize, I can't speak to the Joint Training Force basis. I clearly need to get up to speed on a few things on this.
Alexa, you're coming through kind of muddled. So you're saying you're going to
Sorry about
send a copy to the JFTB?
We will be sending a copy to the Airport Land Use Commission and going through that process. And I will absolutely make sure that the Joint Training Force gets,
When will you send it to them?
I can provide them a copy tomorrow.
Tomorrow's good. To both the JFTB and the Airport Land Use Commission?
We can provide copies, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I would like to make one other comment. When the Old Ranch Town Center was built, the Ralphs was allowed to be placed where it was on the condition that it was commercial because it was too close to the end of the runway. So the town center is in the list, but if you go back and you review the documents leading up to that center, the approvals, the Ralphs was approved only because it was commercial. Had it been residential? No, it was too close to the end. That's in the documents. So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell.
Are there any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Klinger? No?
No comment.
Okay, we'll now open for public comments.
Can I make one other comment? This document was very well written. Very well written.
Thank you.
Chair Miller, the one email comment that I sent out earlier was related to the housing element. So that's the only email comment. I did want to mention that we had a Frank and we had a Ken that came into the meeting, but they left. So right now we don't have anyone on the call wishing to address the commissioners.
Thank you. So the applicant is the city, so I guess the city's already addressed. Nobody's on the call. I will now close the public hearing. And then I guess Commissioner Thomas, if we want to go back to some of the questions you had.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, my question was to both to Patty and to Steve is that you guys were pretty, you were involved heavily in kind of the whole, primarily the site selection part of this adventure. And I'll ask you both, maybe if you could just kind of give a kind of a brief, maybe how you perceived it was handled and how you feel about the results. Do you mind doing that for me?
Sure. I think the way it was handled was great. I mean, the city doesn't have a lot of options. And it seems like we're moving forward with every single one, anticipating some kickback. I think the only thing that's going to be developed is 99 Marina, but I don't believe that's sold. Is that correct, Director Smittle? I think that I know it was for sale for a while, but I don't believe it's sold. And then the Navy area, I guess that could eventually be developed, but I don't think anything else is going to be developed, and I don't think anybody anticipates it being developed either.
Yeah, true. But if it, who knows, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
It could turn into Bellaterra. I mean,
yeah,
Tops of
yeah.
Rossville could turn. I mean, I assume one day it will once the buildings become older and stuff like that. But I don't think there was a lot of options.
Yeah. That's kind of what I felt, but I kind of want to get your firsthand opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Patty, do you mind?
Well, I was not too thrilled with placing Old Ranch on the list. I realize when they say the city has to come up with 1,200 sites, it's like, holy cow, we're almost built out. Where are you going to find 1,200 sites? You're going to start double-decking shopping centers? Well, yeah, it looks like that's a possibility. But Barry Curtis said, if you are pegging that HCD will cut that in half. So that screws up your numbers, okay? One of the things that strongly concerns the residents of College Park East is that there is a development agreement on Old Ranch. Okay, Old Ranch was developed, the town center was developed in 1999 with a 30-year development agreement on the golf course that it was to remain open space recreation. The current owner bought the Old Ranch Golf Club in 2005, which was 6 years into the 30-year development agreement, which meant it had 24 years to go. He knew that that development agreement was there, but every other year, he comes to the city with a project and the city tells him, no, there's a development agreement. This was a promise that the city made to the residents of College Park East to keep this open space, okay? And so now this site appears on, for some housing areas. And it's under a development agreement for open space. I don't know if Sacramento will accept that or not. But beyond that, we just don't want to see the development agreement broken. If there's nothing, if Sacramento says you got to do it, well, you got to do it. But our biggest concern is lack of open space. But secondly, Lamson Avenue. That is our only way in and out. There are 5 access streets to get in and out of College Park East. 1,700 homes and 5 ways in and out. And they all go to Lamson. And when you get on Lamson, you either go east to Garden Grove or you go west to Seal Beach Boulevard. Now, every school kid in this city, with the exception of the kids that go to McGaw, go through Lamson Seal Beach Boulevard every day. And that road, that is a bottleneck. There are no side streets. When you look at PCH and Main Street, hey, if that gets crowded, you got a ton of other streets to go up and down. We don't have that. We are so landlocked, it's almost dangerous. And so we have a concern about putting development up at Lamson and Seal Beach Boulevard. It just scares the living daylights out of us. Because, so that's our concern, that site made the list.
No,
And then to not send anything to the base so they could respond, that's not cool.
Well, we talked about that, but let me, if I could, and maybe this is a question for Director Smittle. They picked 2 sites there at that corner of Lamson, and I agree with Patty. I used to live off Lamson, and it's a busy place. We picked 2 sites there and put a lot of units there, but we overshot a little bit on what we were getting at. Can we limit that one a little bit? Do we have opportunities there?
There's another issue with that, Mike. They're right under the flight tracks. Right under the flight tracks. That's scary. You can what is the word? You can put acoustical into buildings. They can be attenuated for sound. And you can make it so that you could live in there and not hear anything. But there's a safety issue. You can't negate the fact that a plane is taking off over your head. Now, granted, we don't get that much activity, but we do get activity. And I'll tell you, I've been on that bridge when a loaded C5A went over and everybody just stopped. And you're going to put housing there? Because here's the thing. These sites, they can all be rezoned. That doesn't mean they're going to be developed because you got to have a willing developer. But in this case, we do, because the owner of Old Ranch has been trying to build something, anything, and he could well be using this as to kind of break the development agreement and putting this housing under the runway. I'm sorry, that's not good.
Well, let me ask the question, because we overshot by about 250 units or so, I think. I don't have the numbers in front of me, Alexa, but
Yeah,
this
about
is
200.
there's only 120 units at this location. Do we have any opportunity there?
Commissioner Thomas, I think when we were doing this, when we were meeting with the city council, I think the staff is 100% anticipating sites being kicked back saying no. And that was the point of overshooting. Because I think actually before we were overshooting by 400 and now it's only 200. I remember like a couple months ago, we had 1,600 identified.
So you recommend keeping these in here? Like I
Yeah.
don't share the kind of the safety concern that Patty has. I mean, it, you know, I built aircraft for a while, and you know, I think they're pretty safe.
In the fall sky.
So you know, I guess I'm kind of back then. Steve, I'm with you. What I did hear from both of you is that you liked the process. It was exhaustive, sounds like, and we came out where we came out, and I appreciate that. And okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
So, you know, we're talking about that particular site, which I do agree is kind of flaky, but the one that strikes me is the Navy site. I mean, there's 22 acres right there where there's a willing developer, and we've only sort of picked at 5 acres out of 22 acres. You could, I mean, since this housing element is somewhat for show, I mean, why not just triple the number of units there? It's completely reasonable. It's not something that anybody would push back on. It just seems to me that that's a missed opportunity. And I did have one question, is why have we missed the opportunity to put more in this location? Can the two people that were on the committee give me some input on that?
I was under the impression that was the most that the Navy would part with.
That's not what the text says. And I did listen to the video of the April meeting and also looked at the September meeting PowerPoint. And it was like, yeah, the Navy's, they're interested in talking, and we just assigned, you know, 5 acres. It was like, whoa, why didn't you take a bigger bite, guys?
Thank you, Commissioner. I can tell a little bit of information, just you know, trying to research all of these sites myself. The Navy does have a video available on YouTube where they talk about this site. They have been soliciting interest from developers, and their goal that they've stated in this video is that, you know, they are looking for amenities for their residents there on the base. Meaning commercial services. So I think that, you know, again, not being a part of the conversation, and I appreciate Chair Miller's thoughts on the situation. My understanding is that, yes, a lower number was put because the base's primary objective that they're certainly public about is to have commercial uses on the site.
You know, Nick, you are 100% right. I was sitting here looking at the two maps, and the Navy has a site of 22 acres with 150 units. Old Ranch has 5 acres with 150 units.
Bingo.
No, 120 on 5 versus 150 on 22. See, that's
and with all the arguments that you've made about how poor that site is, it's like there's no argument here except the Navy might not want to go that many. You know, we're imposing these numbers on everybody. We're not asking for their approval particularly. So I just felt that this was a missed opportunity. I don't know that we should change it at this point, but I think if there's a problem with at the city council or going forward, this is a fallback place. Just dump more units here. And I feel the same way about 99 Marina. I don't know why that's 20 units per acre instead of 30 like every place else.
Thank you, Commissioner Massetti. My understanding about 99 Marina is that that was part of the conversation that was had, and maybe the other two commissioners could speak to it, just about having that site integrate with the sites around it, kind of being a transitional piece between the single family homes that are there to kind of the south.
Right.
Compared to the higher density across first.
I heard that argument about it being transitional. It's like, you know, that's a real criteria. I mean, that's the last 4 acres in the city, and we need, you know, the highest density we can get. So let's zone it for what we need, not to promote some developer's best profits.
Yes, Commissioner Thomas, I'm happy with no more than 20 units there at that particular site. Thank you.
For what reason though?
Because I think that's enough.
Well, I mean, that seemed to be some of the problem here, is that we just have opinions about how many is enough for, as opposed to what can we get out of a particular site to meet the requirement that the state is imposing on us.
I think, in Old Town, the average lot size is probably about 2,900 square feet. 20 units on that is still smaller than the average lot size in Old Town. And I would say most people consider Old Town fairly developed, pretty urban, for a small little coastal town. I mean, you would have no choice but to go townhomes. So in order to keep with the rest, being like similar to everything else in Old Town, 20 units is definitely more than enough.
Well, I just think that, I don't know, we talked about in order to satisfy the requirement, we're going to have to increase the density. Go up.
Yeah, it's 20 units per acre. It's 86 units total on that spot, Steve.
I know. My point was, why not 30? But to bring you an example, you all drive by Leisure World's the Globe, and right behind the Globe, you'll see those 3 towers, right? I'm sitting in the middle of one right now, and those 3 towers, 126 units, are on 4.9 acres. And we're completely happy in our 1,100 square foot 2-bedroom units that, now cost about $420. So it's doable to put that many units with this kind of configuration in that location, and they're not ugly looking. They don't feel out of place. Just trying to push the discussion to the extreme. That's all.
Well, anything we can do to get these sites off of Old Ranch, because you've got noise, you've got safety, you've got traffic. It's just not a good site.
Yeah, I think one of the things we have to consider too is just because these are approved doesn't mean, they still have to go through the formal process of, like, if a developer decides, yes, I want to develop Old Ranch, they still have to go to the Joint Forest Training Basis. They still have to meet all the requirements that Commissioner Campbell's talking about. Just because the city says yes doesn't mean it's a green light to start developing.
Because the problem we have with this site is developer wants to build something, and he will.
No, and I understand your concern. I absolutely understand your concern, but that developer still has to go through the proper protocols no matter what, whether it's a yes or a no, or if they want to appeal, or, they're still going to have a long, long road ahead in order to build something there.
Well, but you're giving him the green light to start, and that's what scares me.
I understand your concern. I definitely do. I'm not discrediting it at all.
It shouldn't even be there on the list.
Can I also make another comment that'll get me into a lot of trouble here in Leisure World? There's in the future, when we're looking for ways to find low-cost housing to replace some of these sites that certainly will not become available. As of last January, it's mandated that we're required to allow rentals in Leisure World. And right now, when somebody's mother dies, they pretty much sell their unit. But if they're 55, they could hang on to that unit and they could rent it relatively cheaply. Like, I'm talking $1,500 to $1,800 a month. And you would take out of that $1,000 a month, because it's only going to cost you $550 in expenses. So there's a real opportunity for low-cost housing for the elderly, which is a big portion of the need, according to this document, that could be exploited. Hopefully there's nobody watching the video that hear me say that, because they'll be with torches outside of my apartment. But that's a real practical possibility. And all the city has to do is to, tell people about it. I can't tell people about it because I get in trouble, but somebody could tell people about it, and it could even be Section 8 housing. There's no reason it couldn't be. So my point is that there is the ability to fill the state's needs in this particular way that might compensate for not being able to build some new units.
Nick, how many units are for sale over at Leisure World right now? How
Well,
many out of how many?
I can tell you for the last 6 years, the data shows that there's about 40 units a month that sell here. 40
Out of
units
how
a month.
many? What do you have in, how many units in Leisure World?
Oh, there's 6608. But
608.
40 units a month, that's 480 units a year.
Mm-hmm.
And if 10% of those people that are basically forced to sell just said, oh, I'll be a landlord, and they rented them out, you got 40 units a year for the next 10 years. That's 400 units that you could turn into low-cost housing.
I really wouldn't be counting on that. This is Commissioner Klinger. The mutuals are going to make it very difficult for renting because that's not what the community desires in here. On the one hand, and on the other hand, they're not going cheap. The rental I saw in Mutual 7 was $2,200 a month.
It's an
Yeah.
economic issue. You don't want vacancies.
Wouldn't rental?
We don't have vacancies. They
Wouldn't
sell,
rentals
some
drive
of
up
them,
prices?
But if you've
The
got
reason-
45 units a month for sale, that's what I mean.
no, they sell. They buy them. They sell within a week. The one across from me sold without even going on the market.
Okay.
They're hotcakes.
My point is that
selling.
Section 8, you only pay 30% of the rent. So take what somebody can afford, take 30% of the rent. 3 times that can be the actual rent, right? And the
Well, but
government pays.
right now, they're not, you got to talk about the governing bodies here, and they're not looking for that.
I know that I'm in the governing body, and we put up all kinds of roadblocks, but I'm
Yeah,
just telling you,
right.
I'm telling you what's possible, what's practical and possible, not what people want.
If you take away half the supply of Leisure World units available, the price is going to go up.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. But there's plenty of people that already own. That's my point. And they don't have to sell if they can rent it. If my mother dies and owns a unit and she leaves it to me and I'm over 55, I'm the owner. I didn't have to buy it. I've got the smallest unit here is about $180,000. So I got a $180,000 asset, which I can rent for $2,000, and it costs me $550. I'm making $1,400 a month on my 180K asset. I'm making 5 to 7 to 10% on my money, on my investment. That's better than I get in the stock market.
I have a question. Does any of this have anything to do with the housing element in terms of what we're looking at here? Would we ever even include those kinds of things?
My point is we might in the future, if this particular version of the housing element fails the state's requirements.
Well,
We're basically reviewing all the selections, the sites. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to say where I kind of stand on this is I think that the work's been put in, and I agree with Patty that it's a good document. There may be other opportunities. There may be we may have no choice but to look at other opportunities. But I think as it stands, I'm okay moving to approve recommending this document.
and I'll second that.
Do we want to make the motion with the Leisure World? verbiage? That was
Yeah, with the change. Yeah. I saw Nick.
Yeah.
Nick did appreciate Nick. Yeah, thank you for that, Nick. Nick says he liked that revision, and with Marianne seconding, I'm assuming Marianne, you're okay with that.
You know what? That's the stuff that I was talking to them about. So I knew that was that rewording matches with what we were talking about for Leisure World.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. That's a good point. So I believe the motion is to approve the housing element update as amended earlier in this meeting as it pertains to the Leisure World site as read by Director Smittle. Does that sound right?
Sounds good.
You'll be recommending approval.
Yes, recommended. Thank you.
Are we
Thank you,
gonna-
Amy.
Are we discussing perhaps switching some sites?
I am not.
I don't think so.
Because I'd love to see if we could take the 120 acres of Old Ranch and put them down on the Navy site, increase that. I'd like to see if we could do that.
I like
'cause
that,
it's
but
good enough.
All right, Commissioner Thomas, we have a motion.
Yeah, I'm going to move to approve it as it is. And we can
Commissioner-
vote on that, and then maybe
Yep.
Commissioner Campbell can, if it doesn't pass.
And I
Can,
will second it.
Yeah.
City Clerk Harper. Can we have a vote, please?
Yes, Chair Miller, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Klinger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell, how do you vote?
Yes,
Commissioner Massetti, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Motion carries 5 votes yes.
Thank you.
can we move to put the units from Old Ranch down on the Navy?
We just passed it as is. That's what that vote was for.
That's what it was for?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Unless you write it across the screen, I gotta miss something in the translation.
I know. When you voted yes, I was confused.
Yeah. but I will.
That's all right. That's all right. We're good. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah,
City
this
Clerk-
could come back to us, by the way, and in which case we can talk about it then.
Right. Assistant City Attorney Grayson.
Well, normally I would have a statement about this being appealable, but this particular action is a recommendation. So it, as the Community Development Director said, it will automatically go to the City Council on the 7th of February.
Thank you. Is there a director's report?
Just a couple very brief things. First of all, thank you for the welcome here this evening. I'm happy to be at the City of Seal Beach and looking forward to working with all of you on what's going to be a really busy year for the benefit of this group and for anyone else that might be listening. We do have a temporary change of service in our phones here at City Hall. So if you're trying to reach one of us, email is great, but if you dial the main number, someone does pick up the line. We've just got some limitations on how we can transfer phones and so forth, but we are responding to anyone that reaches out to us. And we're hopeful that will be short-lived. Updates are on the website, so by all means go there and check it if you have any questions. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, and City Attorney Grayson, maybe you want to jump in here. There was the meeting prior to my arrival, there was a discussion there at the end regarding Seal Beach shores and height limits. We did look into this further. Staff reviewed the information, and we have determined that under state law, we as the city cannot limit the heights of the units within the mobile home park. They are under the jurisdiction of HCD. Amy, do you want to provide any specifics on that?
Yes, state law substantially preempts the ability of local government to regulate how mobile homes are constructed inside mobile home parks. And so when the ownership arrangement of Seal Beach Shores, when the city had some, or the redevelopment agency had some involvement in that, that was a different situation. Now it's, from our perspective, it's privately owned, and because of language in the health and safety code, we can only, the state looks to what's in Title 25 of the California Code of Regulations. They don't look at what our zoning codes say as far as whether we would like to limit them to, for example, 2-story or a certain height. So we just don't have the ability to do that under the current state law.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Thomas. Amy, thank you for that. Does this mean we're going to amend the development standard or the zoning for that area, or we just kind of write it?
Normally, all cities have standards pretty much dealing with mobile homes, even in mobile home parks. But depending on what those standards are, we will be preempted, even though we're a charter city. The cities tend to leave the language in. We just know what we can and can't enforce. So I would not think that would be something we would get involved in as a priority, but I could be wrong.
I understand completely. Thank you for that. I appreciate that research.
So you can or cannot limit the height at Seal Beach Shores?
The city cannot.
Cannot.
Inside a mobile home park. No, we cannot.
Okay. So if somebody wanted to go higher, they could.
Well, they'd be subject to whatever the regulations are within that park. But there's
Okay.
actually a published court case on this very issue that said, essentially, it doesn't matter what the local zoning rules are. So, and they still have coastal requirements, so that could be another limit.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, who wrote this document?
The housing element?
Hmm?
A,
Who wrote this housing element document?
a combination of consultants and staff. So
Yeah, you did an excellent job. It reads very well. It's a monumental task, and congratulations on that. The other thing I would like to say is, can we adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of Rondi?
Yes, of course.
Can we, Steve?
Yes, of course.
Okay, good. She was a very nice lady. And she was great. She was wonderful. She was so nice, so easy to work with. She was very professional. She knew her stuff. We're going to miss her. We welcome Nick, but we're going to miss Wandy.
I echo what Patty says. Absolutely.
Are there any other commissioner comments?
I just want to say that I think the document was very well written. I thought it was my duty to read every page, and I did it twice, and now I won't do it again. And Rondi was a mentor of mine here at the Golden Rain Foundation board as the treasurer and on the finance committee, and a good friend, and she'll be sorely missed.
Yeah, she was a nice lady. Good person.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I would like to formally welcome Nick to the Planning Commission. We're very, very glad to have you aboard. I mean, you have absolutely demonstrated a commitment to detail at this meeting, which I, as an engineer, appreciate. Thank you, and welcome.
I'm an engineer too, 45 years.
Brilliant. We'll talk later. I hope to meet you someday in Chambers.
Of course.
And also I do want to formally welcome our new Community Development Director, Alexa Smittle. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to working with you. Welcome.
thank you. I appreciate that.
That's all I got, Steve.
Director Smittle, can you give us a little background of who you are? If you don't mind.
Sure. I was most recently the Community Development Director for the City of Westminster next door. Prior to that, I was on the dark side. I was in the private sector, and with a consulting firm called RSG. I was with them for 12 or 13 years, ultimately becoming a principal and a shareholder for a portion of time. And RSG is a consulting firm that works in economic development, finance, real estate, affordable housing, and other kind of land use related and city related solution providing. So I come from a background that's a lot more about kind of analysis and economic development, and moved into the public sector because when you work in consulting, I was all over the state and in and out of different communities, and was really looking forward to kind of getting to know a community, and I'm excited to be able to do that here in Seal Beach.
And do you live in Seal Beach now, or?
I live next door in Huntington,
Very cool. Okay, nice.
but quite close, and a really nice, easy drive up PCH.
And do you have a nickname by chance? Because my Alexa in the background keeps on going crazy every time your name is called.
I know it's terrible. And yeah, I was Alexis for 40 years of my life, because no one could ever conceive that someone's name would be Alexa, and now it's this incredibly popular challenge.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
So if there's any other concerns, in memory of Commissioner Ronnie Winkler, we will join the Planning Commission meeting to Monday, February 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
night.
you, everyone.
Thank you.